The storm had just broken, leaving the frontier town soaked in mud and fear. Lanterns flickered in the saloon windows, casting nervous glances across the wooden street. The people inside whispered about deaths, guns, and shadows from the canyon. Then the saloon doors slammed open, and Ethan Cole stiffened as a figure staggered inside. The man was drenched in blood, eyes wild with terror. He gasped, clutching his chest before collapsing against the bar. Clara Dawson cried out, rushing forward, but the man rasped, "They're coming, from Crossfire Canyon." His words cut the room like a blade. Ethan tightened his jaw, scanning the room as silence gripped every soul. Daniel Reed whispered, "What in hell could drive a man to look like that?" Marshall O'Hara's face turned pale, his hand trembling around his glass. The bloodied man coughed, spitting crimson onto the floorboards, then fixed his eyes on Ethan. "The treasure's curse," he said, his voice breaking. With that, his body went still, leaving only dread in the heavy silence. Ethan's heart pounded. Jedediah Kane's power stretched even here, but something far darker had entered their world. The silence in the saloon weighed like iron. Clara Dawson covered her mouth, trembling as Daniel Reed muttered, "That canyon's cursed." Marshall O'Hara's eyes burned with memory, whispering, "I've seen men die for less." Ethan Cole studied the body, his mind racing. Jedediah Kane rose from his chair, his polished boots echoing. He smirked faintly and said, "Fear makes folk easy to bend." The townspeople exchanged terrified glances, uncertain whether to stay or flee. The air smelled of whiskey and blood, and the dying man's final words lingered like smoke. Ethan clenched his fists, knowing this night had cracked open something buried deep in Crossfire Canyon. Outside, thunder still rolled across the horizon. Ethan Cole stepped into the street, his boots sinking into the mud as Daniel Reed followed closely. Daniel said, "You think it's real?" Ethan's eyes scanned the canyon's distant silhouette, dark against the clouds. "Real enough to kill him," Ethan replied, voice low. Clara stood at the doorway, her eyes pleading silently, but she said nothing. The storm's chill bit through the night, and the street felt hollow, as if the town itself held its breath. Ethan's gut told him this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Marshall O'Hara found Ethan later near the livery stable, his lantern casting long shadows. The old lawman's voice shook as he said, "I know that canyon. Men went hunting gold there, none came back." Ethan's brow furrowed. "You saying ghosts did this?" The marshal's gaze hardened. "Some things ain't ghosts, but worse." Horses shifted uneasily in their stalls, snorting at unseen terrors. Ethan thought of the dead man's eyes, the terror carved deep in them. O'Hara placed a trembling hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Stay clear, son. Crossfire Canyon don't forgive." Ethan nodded, but his heart knew the warning came too late. At dawn, the town gathered by the well, whispers carrying on the cold air. Jedediah Kane stood tall, his voice smooth as silk. "Crossfire Canyon holds what belongs to me," he declared, casting his gaze across the townsfolk. Fear rippled through the crowd. Clara Dawson's eyes flicked toward Ethan, her lips trembling with words she dared not speak. Daniel Reed leaned close to Ethan, whispering, "Hell drag us all into hell for that goal." Ethan's jaw tightened, the weight of choice pressing down. He looked toward the canyon's jagged silhouette on the horizon, and though his heart resisted, his fate was sealed. The morning sun crept over the horizon, burning away the remnants of the storm. Ethan Cole saddled his horse, the leather creaking beneath his hands, his eyes fixed on the jagged outline of Crossfire Canyon. Daniel Reed fussed with his gear, muttering, "Never thought I'd ride toward a curse." Ethan's silence was sharper than any blade. Clara Dawson appeared at the stable's edge, her face pale in the dawn's light. "Don't go," she whispered, her voice carrying desperation. Ethan hesitated, but pulled the reins tighter, masking his turmoil. Marshall O'Hara stood nearby, cane in hand, his voice hoarse with warning. "Crossfire Canyon ain't a place for the living," he said, shaking his head. Yet Ethan mounted his horse, determination etched deep across his weathered face. Daniel swung up beside him, his youthful energy dimmed by dread. The horses snorted, restless beneath the weight of their riders, and the first steps toward the canyon carried the echo of destiny. The town stood still, watching, as though burying them with their eyes before they had even left. The trail wound through rolling plains, golden grasses swaying in the morning wind. Daniel Reed tried to lighten the weight pressing on them, saying, "Maybe the treasure's just old bones and dust." Ethan Cole's gaze stayed fixed ahead, his jaw locked tight. They reined in near the river, crossing, its waters swollen from the storm. Clara Dawson rode up on a chestnut mare, surprising them both. Ethan's eyes flared. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice sharp. Clara lifted her chin defiantly. "If you ride to die, you won't do it alone." Daniel grinned despite the fear, shaking his head. "Guess it's true, no man's ever won an argument with Clara." The river roared, the horses stamping nervously at the edge. Ethan felt torn between fury and relief, but no words could unmake her choice. Together they crossed, the spray of water soaking their boots as the current fought to pull them under. The canyon loomed closer, its shadow crawling over the land like a warning. By midday, they reached the old ridge, where the canyon's edge stretched before them like an open wound in the earth. Marshal O'Hara had followed slowly, his horse lagging behind, but he caught up, breathing heavy. He raised a weathered hand and pointed to the blackened rocks. "Men chased greed here. None came back whole," he muttered, his voice cracking. Ethan Cole dismounted, staring at the jagged cliffs. Shadows seemed to writhe along the stone, as if the canyon itself shifted under the sun. Clara Dawson crossed her arms, whispering, "If curses were real, this is where they'd sleep." Daniel Reed kicked at the dirt, uneasy, his bravado slipping. Marshal O'Hara's eyes glistened as he remembered old companions lost to this place. He placed his palm against the rock. "Some things stay buried for a reason," he said. The wind howled low, carrying the scent of dust and iron. Ethan's hand brushed his revolver, as if steel might protect him from ghosts. In town, Jedediah Kane sat in his office, polished boots propped on a desk, a glass of whiskey glinting in the dim light. His lieutenant, Silas Crow, entered with a cruel grin. "They're heading straight for the canyon," Silas said, his voice dripping with mockery. Jedediah adjusted his black vest, eyes narrowing. "Good. Let them find the ghosts or let the canyon swallow them." Silas chuckled darkly. "And if they come back?" Jedediah swirled the whiskey, his smile thin as a knife. "Then we'll be waiting. Either way, the gold comes to me." He stood, his shadow stretching across the office, dominating the space. Outside, the townspeople went about their day nervously, unaware of the schemes unfolding. Jedediah Kane's hunger was not for legends, but for power. His voice carried finality. "The canyon will break them before I ever lift a hand." The group camped at dusk on the canyon's rim, the sky painted in streaks of red and gold. Ethan Cole stoked the fire, its crackle sharp against the whispering wind. Daniel Reed chewed dried meat, eyes darting nervously at the shifting shadows. Clara Dawson sat close, her voice low. "I don't trust Kane. This isn't just about gold." Ethan's eyes met hers, the firelight flickering in their depths. "It never was," he replied. Marshal O'Hara adjusted his blanket, his old bones weary. "This place remembers every drop of blood spilled here," he muttered. The canyon stretched before them, dark and endless, like a mouth waiting to devour. Ethan's gut tightened as the flames hissed, sparks drifting into the night. The silence pressed in, broken only by the cry of a distant coyote. He knew the first step into the canyon would test them all, and perhaps none would return the same. The canyon swallowed the last light of day, jagged cliffs casting shadows that crawled like predators. Ethan Cole rode ahead, eyes scanning the ravines. Daniel Reed muttered, "Feels like the earth's waiting to bury us." A rustle in the rocks broke the silence. Gunfire cracked, bullets sparking against stone. Horses reared, Daniel shouting, as lead hissed past his ear. Ethan dropped to the ground, revolver flashing in his hand. Clara Dawson ducked behind a boulder, clutching the reins of her terrified mare. Marshal O'Hara growled through gritted teeth, firing back with steady aim despite his trembling arm. Figures darted among the cliffs. Silas Crow's men, faces hidden by scarves, rifles raised. Dust and smoke filled the air as the ambush unfolded, chaos thundering against the canyon walls. Ethan barked, "Hold the line." His words cut through the storm of bullets, binding them together in the face of slaughter. Gunfire echoed long after the first shots, the canyon trembling with violence. Daniel Reed shouted, "They're circling us," as he scrambled for cover. Ethan Cole moved with precision, his revolver striking sparks from rock with every shot. Clara Dawson loaded a fallen rifle, her hands shaking, yet her aim deadly when it mattered. Marshal O'Hara leaned against a stone, blood staining his sleeve, but he refused to fall. Silas Crow's voice rang from the shadows, mocking, "Canyon's hungry tonight." The bandits pressed harder, gun barrels flashing in the twilight. Dust stung eyes, bullets chewed wood and stone. Ethan growled, "Drive them back." His will turned fear into steel, and Daniel roared, emptying his pistol with furious fire. One outlaw fell, another fled. The canyon roared with fury, but the line held. The last shot cracked, then silence bled across the canyon. Ethan Cole wiped dust from his face, chest heaving. Daniel Reed crouched, staring at a fallen outlaw sprawled in the dirt. The scarf slipped, revealing a young face twisted in fear. Daniel's voice trembled, "He's no older than me." Clara Dawson's eyes darkened, guilt shadowing her expression. "This is what Kane breeds," she whispered. Marshal O'Hara leaned heavily on his rifle, sweat and blood streaking his brow. "War don't care for age," he muttered. Ethan's eyes burned, the reality pressing on him like iron. The canyon had taken its toll already, and it had barely begun. Daniel swallowed hard, his boyish fire fading, replaced by something colder, something broken. The silence felt heavier than the gunfire, and the canyon's echoes seemed to mourn. As night settled, their fire flickered weakly against the canyon walls. Daniel Reed sat apart, his face shadowed, eyes haunted by the young outlaw's death. Clara Dawson tried to reach him, her voice gentle, "You did what you had to." Daniel shook his head. "Feels like hell, don't stop coming." Marshal O'Hara poked at the fire, his voice low. "That boy chose his side. Don't let his ghost ride with you." Ethan Cole remained silent, sharpening his knife with slow, steady strokes, sparks catching the firelight. His thoughts were steel, but his heart was heavy. Clara's gaze shifted toward Ethan. "Every road here leads deeper into Kane's shadow," she said. Ethan finally looked up, his eyes hard. "Then we'll burn through his shadow, even if it kills us." The wind carried whispers through the canyon, a sound like voices long dead. Ethan Cole rose, scanning the darkness. Daniel Reed tensed, muttering, "Tell me you hear that." Clara Dawson's hands tightened on her shawl, eyes wide with fear. Marshal O'Hara's voice cracked. "The canyon remembers. Don't ever forget it." Faint glimmers of pale light shimmered among the rocks, drifting like ghostly lanterns. Ethan drew his revolver, his breath steady despite the dread twisting in his chest. The fire sputtered, as if choked by unseen hands. Daniel clutched his pistol, his bravado gone. Clara whispered, "This place is alive." The canyon exhaled with a hollow moan, chilling their bones. Ethan whispered to himself, "Whatever waits here, it's not gold." In the town square, Jedediah Kane addressed the restless crowd, his voice smooth as silk yet sharp as a blade. "The canyon holds wealth beyond measure," he declared, eyes glinting in the lantern light. Townsfolk shifted uneasily, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. A farmer cried, "Men are dying, Kane." But Kane only smiled, replying, "Progress demands sacrifice." His words coiled like snakes, binding fear and greed together. Silas Crow leaned against a post, smirking, his rifle cradled casually, reminding all of Kane's power. The townspeople lowered their eyes, unwilling to defy him. Mothers clutched children, shopkeepers wrung hands, all torn between terror and hunger for gold. Kane lifted his glass in a mock toast. The canyon is ours, and so is the future. His voice cut through silence, leaving the people trembling. He knew fear was the strongest chain. At the canyon camp, Clara Dawson confronted Ethan Cole, her voice sharp. "You're hiding something," she said, eyes burning. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Truth don't change what must be done." Daniel Reed paced nearby, fists clenched. "What truth?" he demanded. Ethan finally spoke, voice heavy. "I've been here before. Years ago I rode with men chasing the treasure. None came back." Silence pressed hard, Clara's eyes filled with hurt. "So this isn't just about Kane," she whispered. Marshal O'Hara lowered his gaze, his voice gravelly. "You survived where others died. That curse already has your blood in it." The fire cracked, shadows twisting across their faces. Ethan's confession cut deeper than any wound, shaking the fragile trust binding them. Marshal O'Hara pulled Ethan aside, lantern flickering weakly in his hand. His voice trembled with memory. "I knew men once, brave as steel, who went after gold here. I led them." Ethan's eyes widened. O'Hara swallowed hard. "I was young, hungry, thought I'd carve my name in stone. Instead, I buried friends in dust and shadow." His gaze drifted to the dark cliffs. "Their screams still echo in my sleep." Ethan's voice dropped. "Why didn't you warn me sooner?" O'Hara's shoulders sagged. "Because you wouldn't have listened. No one ever does." The canyon's wind howled low, carrying ghosts of the past. Ethan saw not just an old man, but a broken soul, chained by guilt. The mentor's burden weighed heavy, a mirror of what Ethan feared becoming. Shadows shifted in camp as betrayal revealed itself. Daniel Reed rose suddenly, revolver drawn, pointing it not at Kane's men, but at Ethan Cole. His voice cracked with rage. "You knew this place was death. You dragged us here." Clara Dawson gasped, stepping back, her face pale. Marshal O'Hara growled, "Put that gun down, boy." Daniel's eyes were wild, haunted by the outlaw's corpse he had seen. "I won't die for your ghosts." Ethan stood slowly, hands raised, calm but tense. "Daniel, this canyon's already in us. Point that gun anywhere you like. It won't change what waits." Daniel's hand trembled, torn between fury and loyalty. The fire sputtered, the canyon echoing his choice. The night erupted in chaos as distant gunshots cracked from the cliffs. Silas Crow's men descended, firing into the camp. Sparks exploded, bullets shattering stones. Daniel Reed froze, torn, then turned his pistol outward, firing at the attackers. Ethan Cole tackled Clara Dawson to cover, growling, "Stay low!" Marshal O'Hara fired from behind the fire pit, his voice rough. "Hold steady." Shadows flickered with muzzle flashes as bandits stormed closer, laughter echoing through the canyon. Silas' mocking voice rang out, "The canyon will take you all." Ethan's blood surged, fury burning brighter than fear. They were no longer prey. They were cornered beasts fighting to survive. The canyon roared with violence, its curse alive in every shot. The night deepened, and the canyon stirred with a voice of its own. Pale shapes drifted along the ridges, glowing like mist-given flesh. Daniel Reed's breath hitched, his voice breaking. "Ethan, do you see them?" Ethan Cole tightened his grip on his revolver, eyes never leaving the apparitions. Clara Dawson clutched his arm, whispering, "They're watching us." Marshal O'Hara lowered his rifle slowly, face hollow. "These ain't ghosts," he muttered. "They're memories. Blood done wash off this ground." The fire hissed as if suffocated, shadows dancing wildly across the canyon walls. The whispers grew louder, like countless voices merging into one, words twisted and broken. Ethan felt his chest tighten, as though the canyon pressed down on his soul. Clara trembled, tears glistening. Daniel swallowed hard, muttering, "I don't want to die here." The night became heavier, each heartbeat echoing against stone. By dawn, exhaustion weighed on them like chains. Daniel Reed sat slumped against a rock, eyes hollow. "They're inside my head," he muttered. Clara Dawson pressed a damp cloth to his brow, whispering, "You're stronger than this." Ethan Cole crouched nearby, voice low. "Hold steady, Daniel. The canyon feeds on fear." Marshall O'Hara spat into the dust, growling, "Or it feeds on guilt." His face turned away, eyes haunted. The canyon was silent now, but its silence was worse than the whispers. Every shadow looked alive, every gust carried the stench of decay. Daniel clutched his pistol, shaking. "If Kane's behind this," he said, "he's not just greedy, he's damned." Ethan's jaw hardened. Kane's greed lit the fire. The canyon's curse keeps it burning. The sun rose weakly, pale and cold, unable to chase the darkness. As they pressed deeper, Ethan Cole stumbled against a jagged stone, visions slashing through his mind. Faces from the past, men he once rode with, screamed silently, their mouths twisted in agony. He gasped, clutching his head. Clara Dawson rushed to him, crying, "Ethan, what is it?" He forced a breath, voice strained. "The canyon's showing me what I left behind." Marshall O'Hara's eyes narrowed, voice heavy. "It knows your sins." Daniel Reed backed away, terror in his voice. "Then it'll tear us apart from the inside." Ethan forced himself upright, his eyes blazing with fury. "No curse breaks me. Kane will answer for this." Clara's hands trembled, but she didn't let go. The canyon loomed larger, darker, as if swallowing their resolve. Farther down the canyon, Silas Crow appeared with his men, their rifles gleaming in the dim light. His grin was cruel. "Welcome to your graves," he mocked. Gunfire erupted once more, echoing off the stone. Daniel Reed dove for cover, firing wildly. Clara Dawson pulled a revolver from her dress, determination replacing fear. Ethan Cole charged forward, his voice a growl. "Crow, you'll answer for every life you've taken." Bullets sparked against rock, screams tearing the canyon air. Marshall O'Hara fired steadily, his old bones fueled by rage. Silas laughed, reloading calmly behind cover. "The canyon belongs to Kane, and soon, so will your bone." The fight raged fierce, dust and blood mingling in the air. When silence finally returned, the canyon floor was strewn with bodies, blood mixing with dust. Ethan Cole stood over Silas Crow's corpse, his chest heaving. Clara Dawson touched his shoulder, her voice soft. "It's not over." Daniel Reed wiped blood from his face, his eyes darker, older than before. "We won, but at what cost?" Marshall O'Hara leaned on his rifle, breath ragged. "The canyon don't let victories stand. It always takes something back." Ethan's gaze drifted to the shadowed depths ahead. He knew the treasure was close, but so was the curse. His voice dropped to a whisper, filled with dread. "This is only the beginning." The canyon exhaled a cold wind, carrying with it the weight of every death. The canyon narrowed into a gorge where ancient carvings scarred the stone. Ethan Cole traced a hand over the weathered symbols, his voice low. "This isn't just a curse, it's a warning." Clara Dawson stepped closer, her breath trembling. "A warning from who?" Daniel Reed stared at the markings, his fear swelling. "Looks like graves stacked in stone." Marshall O'Hara's voice cracked with age. "Men knew long ago the canyon takes more than it gives." The wind wailed through the cliffs, carrying whispers like chants. Ethan's stomach churned, realization dawning that the treasure was bound in blood. He turned to his companions, his face pale but resolved. The gold was never meant to be taken. It was buried with the dead it belonged to. The gorge seemed to pulse with the weight of centuries, pressing silence over them all. They entered a cavern, its walls glistening faintly as if veins of gold bled through the stone. Clara Dawson's voice echoed, "So it's real." Ethan Cole shook his head, his tone grim. "Real but cursed." Daniel Reed's eyes widened, greed and fear warring within him. "Enough gold to buy a kingdom," he whispered. Marshall O'Hara's face twisted in pain. "I lost good men chasing this glow. They thought it was salvation. It was their grave." Ethan stepped forward, shadows swallowing his frame. This is the heart of the canyon. This is where the curse was born. The cavern's silence thickened, broken only by the drip of unseen water. Clara grasped Ethan's hand, her eyes full of dread. We should leave this to the dead. The air grew colder, as if the canyon agreed. Suddenly the cavern shook, stones tumbling from above. Daniel Reed stumbled, shouting, "It's coming down!" Ethan Cole pulled Clara Dawson against the wall, as dust filled the air. Marshall O'Hara dropped to one knee, coughing hard, his old strength faltering. From the darkness came faint shapes, ghostly figures draped in tattered uniforms, their hollow eyes glowing. Clara gasped, clutching her chest. "They're the dead." Ethan's heart hammered, voice strained. "The canyon keeps its guardians." Daniel raised his pistol, but his hand shook violently. O'Hara forced himself up, face pale. "These aren't men. They're the price." The apparitions moved closer, their mouths opening in soundless screams, the cavern echoing with terror. Ethan realized the canyon demanded their lives, not their bullets. From the shadows, Jedediah Kane appeared with armed men, his smile cutting through the gloom. At last, he declared, stepping into the cavern's glow. Clara Dawson hissed, "He followed us." Daniel Reed's grip tightened on his pistol, torn between rage and terror. Ethan Cole glared, revolver in hand. "You'll damn us all, Kane." Kane's voice dripped with arrogance. "Damnation is worth the gold." His men spread out, rifles raised, their faces pale in the ghostly light. Marshall O'Hara leveled his rifle, his voice shaking with fury. "You fool. This place will eat you alive." Kane laughed, the sound hollow. "Then I'll be remembered as the man who owned the canyon." The ghosts stirred, their glow intensifying, as if Kane's greed called them forth. The cavern erupted into chaos. Kane's men opened fire, bullets sparking off stone. The ghosts surged forward, shrieking in voices not of this world. Daniel Reed cried out, "They're not stopping." Ethan Cole grabbed Clara Dawson, pulling her into cover. Marshall O'Hara fired with grim resolve, every shot echoing against the wailing dead. Kane stood tall, shouting, "The gold is mine," even as his men fell screaming. The cavern shuddered, stalactites crashing down, dust choking the air. Ethan roared above the din. "We have to end this now." His voice was raw, torn between rage and despair. The canyon's curse had awoken fully, and none could escape untouched. As the gunfire clashed with ghostly cries, fate tightened its grip around them all. The cavern shook violently as Ethan Cole faced Jedediah Kane, both standing amid falling stone and shrieking ghosts. Kane's eyes burned with madness. "The gold is mine," he roared. Ethan leveled his revolver, his voice steady. All it ever bought was death. Clara Dawson pulled Daniel Reed behind cover as Marshall O'Hara fired desperately into the swarm. Kane lunged toward the golden veins in the rock, reaching with greedy hands. The canyon howled, the apparitions closing in, their cries splitting the air. Ethan's heart thundered as he realized the curse demanded sacrifice. Kane tore a fragment of gold from the wall, holding it high with triumph. The cavern screamed, ghosts swarming him. His men fell, their cries silenced as shadows consumed them. Clara Dawson shouted, "Ethan, stop him!" Ethan charged forward, slamming Kane against the stone. "You brought this curse on us all," he growled. Kane clawed back, eyes wild. "Better cursed and rich than forgotten in dust." Marshall O'Hara staggered, coughing blood but still firing, his voice hoarse. "End this, Ethan, end it now." The cavern rumbled like thunder as destiny closed in. With a roar, Ethan Cole wrenched the gold from Kane's grip and hurled it into the abyss. The canyon exploded with a furious wail, apparitions surging like a storm. Kane screamed, diving after it, his body swallowed by shadows. Clara Dawson shielded her face as rocks crashed down. Daniel Reed fired blindly at the ghosts, his voice cracking. "They won't stop." Marshall O'Hara forced himself upright, his rifle shaking. "They want blood, not bullets." Ethan's chest heaved, realization piercing him. One life had to pay for the canyon's rage, and he knew what must be done. Marshal O'Hara stepped forward, his face calm despite the chaos. "It's my turn," he said softly. Ethan Cole shouted, "No," but the old lawman raised a hand. "I led men here once. Their blood's on me. Let me finish this." He walked into the center of the cavern, rifle raised high. The ghosts swarmed, their cries deafening. O'Hara fired a final shot, his voice echoing. "Rest now, boys." The apparitions consumed him in blinding light, the cavern trembling as if mourning. Clara Dawson clutched Ethan's arm, tears streaking her dirt-stained face. Daniel Reed lowered his pistol, stunned. The canyon's roar softened, silence creeping in like dawn. The cavern collapsed in silence, the ghosts gone. Ethan Cole led Clara Dawson and Daniel Reed into the pale dawn outside, their faces hollow with grief. Daniel whispered, "He gave himself for us." Clara's hand tightened on Ethan's. "Then we carry his memory." The canyon behind them smoldered with dust, its hunger appeased but never gone. Ethan looked back once, his voice low and final. "The gold's not treasure, it's a curse carved in stone." The wind howled through the canyon, carrying Marshal O'Hara's sacrifice like a hymn. As the sun rose, Ethan's eyes burned with a truth he could never forget. Sometimes survival is the only victory.